Do you hear him? Do you hear him take off? Do you hear him hit the firmament?
That's what that second one is, right? The first one is the booster,
Yep.
and then that's the sound of him smacking against the firmament.
Are you familiar with astro? Are you familiar with astro projection at all?
I
Yes.
I think. Oh.
Oh, that was wow. Did I did I tickle a nerve or something? Because usually you don't just jump in until some stuff is going on. But I said astral projection and you were like, boom.
Hey, sometimes everything's just aligned. Yeah, but it's astral, Astral. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So what made you bring that up?
I was just curious, just curious.
Just run. Let's move
Just
on.
rent. Well, because I I've heard people say that they've done that and that they've been able to view the Earth. I haven't looked into it yet. I just started. It was just something I heard, and I'm going to start digging into it a little bit. But I've heard
Wait a
that
minute,
people.
but you shared that you guys did that when you shared your testimony. Wasn't that part of what you and your friends were doing?
Well, no, we were. I was. I didn't know it at the time, but I was trying to. You mean like outer body kind of stuff?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
so I knew one of the people in your friend group, and I
Mm-hmm.
remember hearing his story. And part of it was that the group would do things together, in that state of being, and they would be
Mm-hmm.
able to relate about it later, like
Yeah.
confirm what was happening later, so that,
Yeah.
it was confirmation that indeed they were doing something out of their bodies.
Right.
Weren't you so you didn't try to do that then yourself?
Um, well, not to that extent, not to that extent. And to be quite honest, it kind of freaked me out. So I was a little bit worried about stuff like that.
I think you should be.
Wow.
Is that the buzzer? Is the show over?
Wow. What was
I
that?
just was. I was just. It's just a warning buzzer when you guys are getting into things that are dangerous.
No,
Yeah.
okay. Well, oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, that was part of the things I was messing around with in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that plus like hypnosis. So I had a hypnosis book, and I would go through the book, try to hypnotize people
Mm-hmm.
and talk about past lives and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, um, so did you see the Earth was round? Did you
So
She didn't go
that
out that far.
yeah.
see?
Come on,
That's what I'm
Ron.
talking. That's what I'm
No, so
talking about.
I never um, really did anything real. My friend, though, we were both doing it, not together, but like during the same time period, we were experimenting with that. Um, so she had a really weird experience where if it was very real, and she was like in a different room, and papers were blowing around, like she could feel the wind, and that did scare her enough, I think, to not really try it seriously again after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, that's that will happen. It's a interesting um, interesting dynamic you start to enter when you play with that kind of stuff. That's for sure. At least from my experience.
Well, so you believe that there is a real spirit world and real good and real evil and all that. If you're right claiming Christianity, then wouldn't you also affirm that there are some things out there that are real?
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I would say so. I thought about that would be a good topic at some point, spirit world. I mean, there's I think, I don't know, I feel like most people have some sense of, that realm, right? Um, a lot of people talk about it. People have different views on it, but sometimes you hear some pretty consistent stories, or consistent experiences, that maybe not the same, but they're very similar. Um, and what about you, Dana? Wouldn't you say that you believe that? And I would assume that you believe in it not in just an intellectual way, but somewhat you. What was that, Jeff? Was that a don't say anything, Dana? Was that like a code?
I'm just feeling
Wouldn't
left out. That's all.
okay. Wouldn't you say, Dana, that you've had some experiences that would maybe even confirm that?
Not as strongly as I've heard some other crazy stories, but there are a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so interestingly enough, just this past Sunday at the church we were at, we go there twice or three times a month. We're not committed to it, but we've been visiting, and there was a man there, and I think after I talked with him pretty much the whole church service, and then I think my comment to Jeff was that like that was one of the best conversations I've ever had, or something like that. I was raving about this conversation I had, and it started off with him. I've only met this man before, and he doesn't talk to anybody. He looks like an older, like an older, like vato or gangster, like Mexican guy, gangster. That's what he looks like. He looks like older vato, real, shirt buttoned all the way up, looks sharp, but just has that. He didn't even have visible tattoos, but it's just something about the look, like the hardness, maybe, and the presentation. So he never talks to anybody. I even asked him, I mean, he'll just say hi. And I think the last time I went, I said, "Oh, are you going to go say hello to people?" And he's like, "No, I don't talk to anybody here." So I'm like, okay. I really didn't know what's his story.
I feel like you're describing like a Colombian drug lord to me right now.
That's when my impression was, I didn't know he wasn't hanging off this, not like off the street like homeless, but like like a street, more of a street look, and he's coming to the church for help or whatever. And then he starts talking to me. I'm sitting in the back because I feed my baby. So it's like the sanctuary is closed off, and there's this hall, and then there's this back open room where you could hear the sermon on speakers. So I sit there with my baby, and so this one man's there. And then he just starts talking to me, and he starts off with, when I was in the hole in San Quentin, an angel appeared to me. And he just starts talking about his, conversion. And it involved being in the hole in San Quentin, not wanting to go out and riot and kill people that day because there was this riot, and how this angel kept appearing there. And the angel told him over and over, it's just this ball of light, or angel of light, and how it would tell him that he's going to be free. And, he was facing like getting locked up for 25 to life or something. Anyway, he goes on. So in the course of events, what that angel told him was true. During his time in prison before he was released, his conversion, was a very strong, like spiritual thing, like where somebody was asking him in prison, like showing him a Bible. He's just looking at the Bible like, "Hey, I don't want anything to do with that Bible." And then the guy is asking him, "Do you believe in God?" And just by asking him, the man, starts getting scared, like really scared. And he just said he'd never been scared before in his life. So anyway, I don't want to go over every detail, but it was a very dramatic spiritual type testimony. And then he told me about how next, how he's seen the devil, and he was sitting in a Catholic church, and the devil was sitting next to him and talking. Anyway, that's how the conversation started off. So I'm just like, okay. And I've talked with crazies before. I'm fairly suspicious, when people start saying, not like super suspicious, but generally I'm going to be more suspicious when someone says things of that nature, God talked to them or whatever. Cause you just know sometimes it's not the case. And there's crazy people and but yeah, through the whole conversation, I never, I'm kind of checking his story in my mind with the state of mind of the person in front of me. Yep. And for me, it was one of the most like how in the Bible where that woman says, he told me everything I ever did. And people say Jesus spoke with authority. Yep. My feeling was I'm not talking to a crazy person, and I'm talking to someone with authority. And some of the other like details or like his, he was just talking about everything from being a little critical of the pastor to what just basically saying people's impressions of me. And it just had that ring of truth to it. It's a really, really weird it felt very abnormally spiritual. And I think Jeff especially could vouch for, I'm not running away always, with flights of fancy about stuff, with God type things. But it was like, I'm really kind of grateful and kind of mulling over some of the things that he shared with me about. Like, it was really, really interesting.
Yes. No, it sounds fascinating to me as well. I would definitely be intrigued by that kind of thing. I've come across I don't know, one or two of those kind of experiences.
Oh, no. Oh. That's a red flag from Jeff.
Yes, also feeling a little bit left out.
So I don't know. I have not met very many people like that. And so I'm leaning towards there was something of the Holy Spirit in there. And I'm sure that sounds kooky, but it just felt like a real, maybe not like a presence, but just something. It was really interesting.
Jeff, you and I experienced, and I witnessed it. And we talked about it before we brought it up, but you had that experience where I just happened to be there that day. Would you lean towards that was a more of on the spiritual side of things?
Well, it was certainly on the spiritual side of things, if such things are genuine and real. So to this day, I have to, the skeptical side of me questions whether I was in some sort of self-induced hallucinogenic state. I wasn't on drugs or anything. I was just a regular day in my house, but supposedly people can put themselves into these sort of states of mind. And in my case, I just knelt down to pray too. I wasn't even praying very long, and that happened. So, but the skeptical side of me questions what took place as being real. However, what did take place, real or not, was a very spiritual encounter with God, in which the feeling was that I was in God's presence in a very unique way. Reading the Bible last week reminded me of that time where Moses asks to see the glory of God, and God lets him see a little glimpse of it, like as God's going away. So you have the story in the Bible of that, and that to me is a way of describing what it felt like. It was as though God sort of revealed a little bit of himself to me in that moment. So yes, spiritual and very real and very hard to explain. I certainly sometimes feel that my own doubts about it is almost an insult to God, because God was kind enough to interact with me, and I, to this day, kind of cast doubts on that. So he gave me a nice gift, and I sometimes wonder if I'm not appreciating that. So that's a lot of words that I've just given you, but I had this moment where, for about an hour, I was in a sort of special presence of God.
Yeah, no, that's interesting stuff. I feel like a lot of people, I know I did myself, um, at certain periods of time. I think when, you know, we've talked about kind of the beginning of things, and we, you know, we mentioned our testimonies, and we mentioned, you know, some of the experiences that we've had, um, in the past. And I think, interesting topic about, you know, the spiritual world, things like that. So many things, I think at particular times we would call it your walk or your journey or whatever it might be. Um, there are there are times that you view things in a more spiritual light than others, I think, right? Sometimes, I don't I know I did, and maybe you did not, but I know I did. I everything was spiritual at one point for me. You know, there was everything kind of had some representation, or, you know, um, some kind of clue, or it was you know, a divine appointment, those kind of things. And, it seems like that's a pretty common experience, at least in the church and people that you talk to, with like new believers and stuff. And I think that's a well known thing too. You know, they refer to it as being on fire.
Yeah, yeah. I think right now, for me, I think earlier this week, I had a kind of a weird experience, and Jeff and I were just talking about it, where there's a situation going on, and I had a dream. This was the second dream I've had regarding these people in our life, and it was really weird. And the dream felt weird. You know, some dreams are just like whatever, but this dream felt, you know, it made an impact and felt meaningful. And anyway, part of it was about this man we know, you know, being dressed and going to church, or basically he was going to be more religious. That was the dream, and that's what I was recognizing in the dream. You know, the way he was dressed and was carrying his Bible, and so that was strange. You know, just I think it was just 5 days later or 6 days later to then see him. You know, some events are happening in his life, but to see him dressed up, which is out of the norm for him, you know, going to church. And Jeff had even noted, like, he pulled open the curtains to show me, and it was just it felt, you know, like, oh, what was that? You know, is that from God? It seems like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that? Is it just so I could pray more for him, or something? But there was that weird conversation with the Mexican man at church, or Colombian. Maybe he's Colombian. And then I've just been praying a lot about certain situations. And you know, maybe it started with the internet being off. I think that's when it started. So maybe 2 weeks ago, when the internet was off and we couldn't do this amazing show, and I couldn't get the internet, but I also couldn't get very distracted. So I really started mulling over um, some spiritual things. And that kind of has been like the last 2 weeks. So it's been a more on fire mode, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
than usual.
Yes. So I mean, with that said, I read that article that you sent me today.
Hold on.
Oh,
There's something important here. I don't know how you're transitioning over to that article,
Because we're going to talk about spiritual things.
Spiritual things. But am I correct that you brought up astral projection because you were talking about the flat Earth and there's a connection?
to check to see if the Earth is flat.
Yes.
That's one way to do it, I guess. If you don't trust NASA and the satellites, like how do the satellites work? I don't know.
I just want to make sure we get back to that. So are you saying that maybe we could astral project ourselves out into space?
To confirm. To debunk.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Are you asking Dana and stuff because you're looking for maybe a team?
Yeah. I'm looking for some shipmates to take this journey with.
Because you want some witnesses.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, I mean,
no sense in just going up there by yourself.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I mean, who would believe it? I mean, anybody can make that claim, right? I mean,
yeah. But if you go up with some other people, I see.
Well, yeah.
Now, coincidentally, I was so curious by your strange idea because I caught you. Well, while this conversation went in different directions, I did catch that you said that, and I thought it was interesting. So I searched it, and sure enough, there is. I have a picture shown here. Can you see it on your phones? Or there is a guy who I guess says you can end the controversy. Yeah, I guess he's done it. I guess he was doing astral projection, and he went up above the earth and saw that it is indeed. In this picture, it's flat with kind of like a mountain underneath.
Well, there's so many of those cases, Jeff, where you think I'm crazy, and
sure enough, as we can see from this picture, is this an actual picture from astral projection?
Yeah, cell phone.
So got to bring our cell phones when we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wear white sneakers.
That's important. Okay, isn't that from people who killed themselves?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let's not do that, Ron.
I love that buzz. By the way, that's nice.
Oh, I'm gonna have to fix it. I don't know what that is.
I love that. Anyway, so please go ahead, Jeff. What were you about to say?
I just wanted to make sure we didn't skip over that little thing you said that astral projection could be used to find out if the Earth is really flat or not.
That's right.
I kind of feel bad that we're laughing. There are some people out there who are probably offended.
Well, no, I mean I don't think it's necessarily something to. It's funny just because sometimes the way it's presented, but it's like anything else. People obviously use arguments or have things to say about it. And when you listen to them, sometimes they are compelling, right? They have some interesting points, so you can't necessarily discount everything they say. Some things are kind of far-fetched, it seems like, and other things you go, I don't know, maybe it sounds interesting.
So you were saying
anyway, about what? What was I?
You were wanting to talk about that article that Dana sent.
Oh, the article, yes, that Dana sent. Yeah, so I read that article, Dana, and found that to be kind of interesting. I'm not sure. Well, you want to tell us what that article's about?
Well, I didn't read the article. I listened to the interview. So if the interview was just like summarized in the article, then there should be a pretty clean matchup, but it was basically the story of this woman who came out of the evangelical purity culture, and she felt very badly damaged from the whole experience, and how it, negatively affected her ability to be a complete person and to have healthy sexuality, I guess. So it was Jeff had wanted me to listen to it, and anyway, I thought it was interesting. I also thought she was kind of she seemed like really extreme in the way she internalized the messages, and she just seemed like an extreme case. And granted, like Jeff had emphasized to me that we weren't part of purity culture, although our church that we all started at did emphasize kind of pure pure living in dating relationships. But I guess it wasn't the heavy-handed purity culture.
Yeah, no, and the author of that article, or whoever did the interview too, but she made it seem as and I would expect this as an article, especially in NPR.
Unbiased, by the way.
Yeah,
I was listening to their
very
pledge
unbiased.
drive or their request for funding, and how else are we going to get unbiased news?
That's right.
Except through NPR.
And there it is. Thank you for bringing it up.
So I have the picture of the article up for all of our viewers.
Yes, perfect, exactly. So with that said, there's some feeling in the article of this feeling of oppression due to the purity movement, as she called it, and there was this internal conflict. I don't know. Do you feel any of those same ways? I've recently, in the past year and a half or so, I've come across some women that I've read their articles, and I've watched many of their videos, and I picked up on some of the things they're saying. They're kind of like anti-feminists, and they're more support men and the different roles that men and women have. So they're almost on the extreme end of that, of course, but they would look at some of those things like she was saying, and alluding to like this oppression that came from that culture. They would say, no, that's not the way that they feel about those things. Did that resonate with you at all? Did she have anything that you felt like, yeah, I relate to that?
Well, I think immediately I started making some dismissive comments about the article or about the interview, and Jeff had to tell me to just cool it down, because just listen. I for me, I've been really thinking through my years as a young adult lately, and what things led to my character development. And there are a lot of really negative things and negative aspects to the person I was as a young adult. And so coming from I had such a I did not have a standard of purity during that time.
And both of you guys kind of speak vaguely, so let's be clear here. So purity is not having sex until you're married. The purity movement would have a promise that you wouldn't have sex, but not just sex. All sexual activity, up to and including kissing, depending on the group, but I'm pretty sure some would say that too. And so there is a real strong belief that one ought to reserve all sexual, visual, physical activities for the marriage and the marriage bed. And then alternatively, Dana, you're saying you were kind of raised in, let's say, while those ideas might have been floating around, you were kind of living out the alternative perspective where there was a little bit more freedom, a little bit more, or not just a little bit, just it wasn't that culture.
No, yeah, so not at all. No purity culture when I was a young adult and teen and young adult. And so I was I've just been remembering how how much of a negative impact it had on me as a person. You know, there's health risks, and I also really regretted how degrading everything became. How I initially had sexual activity in a committed relationship, like with a boyfriend. But then towards the end of that time period, I was just doing that with random people who I didn't even hardly know. So, and it's really a bad life. It's just so bad. It's so negative. I believe that's sinful behavior, and it has real deep consequences for the person who's living that out. So when I, through becoming a Christian and being at church, first started hearing more about having standards and reserving, sex for marriage and seeing the value in that, um, it was 100% improvement upon my life, like 100%. So I guess seeing for me experiencing a really non-pure lifestyle and not seeing anything valuable in it, um, I just came at this interview with a lot of baggage, I guess. So while though I can say, yeah, maybe this lady experienced some, maybe it was too heavy-handed or whatever, but I would think that don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That in upholding to a standard of sexual purity, um, you're holding on to something really good, you know. And I think our culture at large doesn't have a problem with being too pure.
Yeah.
Now, you can rest assured, Dana, that they're going to interview you as a person representing the other side, the side that was negatively affected by the unpurity culture. And they'll say, we have a guest from the from the DJ Ron show to show the negative side of the opposite view. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I won't hold my breath for that.
Yeah. Well, I struggled I struggled reading the article um and not because it was written by a woman by any means, but I struggled having any kind of um I guess not sympathy, but it didn't resonate with me in a way that I understood completely what she was saying, but that message of oppression, and as Dana put it perfectly, throwing the baby out with the bathwater is a perfect way to describe it because I think there are plenty of things that you can point to um, in those experiences. We'll call them sexual experiences to be exact, right, Jeff? Because we don't want to speak too vaguely
Say it
about
again.
that stuff. Yeah, more specifically, sexual experiences, right?
Unfortunately,
There.
I'll be honest, I was reading the article while you were talking, Ron.
Oh, oh. Well, there are plenty of things that you can point to um, and visibly see that have consequences to engaging in sex outside of and we're just going to say a committed relationship. Um, and so uh, I don't know. I don't know exactly, from the article where she was going. I didn't hear her specifically say that, living a a loose, if you want to call it loose lifestyle. I didn't hear her saying that. I didn't hear her advocating for that, but she certainly wasn't. She certainly wasn't on the side of the purity lifestyle, and she wasn't didn't really have any positives to say about it, which to me kind of surprises me. It surprises me when someone, can walk away from those experiences and they view it all 100% as negative. That's always very interesting to me. But I think Dana, you being on the other side of things as far as experiences are concerned and being a woman, best relate to uh, her as an individual. Although everybody can kind of speak the same kinds of things. So anyway, the reason why I brought it up though, the reason why I brought it up is because you know we talked about spiritual things. Um, do you feel that that is a spiritual kind of matter? It is a spiritual. It rests in the spiritual realm, and therefore, because it does that, there are consequences to certain behaviors, things like that. Would you? That how you would view it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess it's a moral issue, right?
Mm-hmm. So
So
is that
do
spiritual?
you,
Is it moral? Is moral spiritual though, or is moral just a you know that's kind of how we function as a society, or does it hold any kind of spiritual weight to it? There's
well,
two.
yeah, I guess I'm basing my morality. I try to have a one-to-one relationship between like the Bible and morality. So I guess I'd say that equals spirituality. It's a spiritual thing.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you agree with that, Jeff?
I think it's an issue with terms. I don't even know what Ron means by is it spiritual. Love the Lord God with all your heart, mind, soul, muscle, strength, or something. What is the soul? What is the spirit? What is spiritual? You might need to unpack those terms, but without unpacking them, just forgetting being incredibly precise here. Um, God is spiritual. God created some sort of thing called morality, which appears to be at some sort of whatever spiritual means level.
you're
we're
having
more
you're having somewhat of an audio problem, by the way.
we're more than okay,
There you
but
go.
we're more than just molecules. So if we're just talking about moving molecules around, then even killing somebody, I'm just shifting some molecules around here and there. So I would say killing somebody is wrong because it's morally wrong, as Dana was just saying, which is ultimately comes back to a spiritual type of reason where you're believing there's actual rights and wrongs beyond the molecules of this world. So that when you do shift the molecules around in a certain way, there actually is a moral wrong, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So the underlying truth behind all of this is that there is something going on here more than just the molecules.
And
I
and
don't know
you
if
are
that
breaking up a
I don't
little
know
bit.
I don't know if that's clear or not, but
Well, yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And you're right. We're going to have to kind of just rely on the good old axiom um, thing at this point. And when we talk about spirituality, we just kind of go with that common knowledge of what we all have with it. The things that most people would agree to. and that is, that beyond what you see, beyond the act itself, and engaging in the act, it's a spiritual connection with somebody. Would you agree with that?
So I don't know how you're using these words. I don't know what you mean by a spiritual connection with somebody. I don't know exactly what you're getting at. But
Okay.
I'm coming from the perspective. I was trying to connect the fact that perhaps all of the meaning behind all this has some sort of spiritual meaning, but I'll just pull away from that because that sounds confusing to me. I believe there's a moral truth to all this. There's a good and there's a bad. There's a right and there's a wrong. And so when one engages in activities which goes against the moral truths of the universe as defined by God, it's not good, period. And we seem to be in tune with that somehow. Our feelings, to some level, seem to run parallel with those underlying truths. It's a mostly true kind of feeling. There seem to be some differences between some people on what particular morals they really feel are good and so forth. But the general truths, we kind of experience them, and then I think God refines them. That's why revelation is important. So all of that said, why is it wrong to have sex with somebody who's not your wife or your husband? I think is what we're getting down to, right?
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, yeah, certainly you can talk about that, but
And if I were to have relations with multiple people, you said like what I sort of have spiritual bonds with these different people. I don't know if I would even know what that means.
Okay. Well, no, that's I'm not looking for anything in particular that, I don't need a certain kind of answer. I'm just curious about it. I think people that make the opposite argument of that article tend to lean on the spiritual side of things. And that is they have convictions in place that would dictate um, the that certain behaviors are wrong. So they themselves would not engage in like premarital sex. They would engage in certain activities, even getting close to premarital sex. There would be um, no kind of no kind no 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 sexual experimentation, no sexual activity for the simple fact that they want to remain pure. So I would tend to think that if someone does have that conviction, though someone does lean on that would be somebody that is more engaged in the spiritual realm, somebody that's more concerned about convictions and more concerned about their behavior in the physical realm has consequences to that, and that seems to be somewhat tied to these convictions. Which, I mean, when you call that spiritual, I mean, isn't that kind of
in a
fall into
roundabout
that?
way, I'd say sure.
Okay, yeah, that's all I'm getting. That's all I'm
Yeah.
getting at.
Yeah. And to a person, I mean, I don't think I know anybody who would hold to the standard of no sex before marriage who's not a religious person. Either they're a Christian or, a devout Muslim. I mean, maybe I'll remember somebody from my past, but I can't think of anybody who would have that standard who's non-religious.
I would imagine that they must exist, but maybe we're not just very going very far beyond our own culture.
Sure. But yeah, so what a takeaway from the article though could be that while I'd hope to encourage my children to embrace a pure sexual morality, um, I guess I could maybe, Jeff, what are you doing?
Yeah, Jeff is very, very interesting.
Maybe there are sound effects that he's trying out. I was just going to say, a takeaway could be in trying to communicate these values to feel like I'm being heckled.
Yeah, that's kind of
Really.
that's I feel like I'm being trolled right now.
Are you silencing me?
I'm trying my best to figure out why my phone is vibrating. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on with it.
Well, it's not just vibrating. There's like a rattlesnake noise in the background. There's a couple things happening.
I was trying to work on the problem.
I think because you're bad. That does that when when the cord comes out, it vibrates to tell you to put on battery
I just don't
saver.
feel like we have the best show on this planet.
No, well, maybe in the state, it's only statewide the best show, or 2 states, California and Arizona. Anyway, the takeaway though is just okay when I try to communicate to these principles to my children. I don't know, she was accusing the leaders of her purity movement of being overly focused on the women's behavior, like the women's responsibility. I guess she felt that was oppressive. However, the men are held as these weak people, I guess, too. So I'm sure, I guess we'll hear voices soon of men who have come out of purity culture with their tales of how they felt maligned and mistreated. Well, because they're viewed as weaker than the women.
Yeah, here's what I think.
Ooh. This is a special moment.
Oh God. Oh, Jeff. I think Jeff just senses something. I think
no more rattlesnake. He's not going to send the rattlesnake.
So, well, it is something. It is something that I wouldn't mind talking about more in the future for sure, because there's some different aspects of it that I think are interesting, physical and spiritual, but people's convictions on that kind of stuff are pretty interesting. And so if possible, I wouldn't mind shifting gears just for a moment.
I'm ready, Rob. I'm ready.
Okay, good. Because before you got on, Dana, Jeff and I talked about how there's just so many things that we could talk about, want to talk about. So many things that we did, so many things we did not get to talk about. So,
well, it's been 2 weeks, right?
Well, yeah,
it's a lot of conversations.
So back to the spiritual kind of thing. There is, last week was 9/11. And I remember at the time when that actually happened, that seemed like a very spiritual event to me. And I remember it wasn't just me, but it was a whole lot of people felt like that was kind of a spiritual event. And I remember I was doing a Bible study at the time, and I think the most people ever showed up that night. And we always did it on a Tuesday night, and of course it had happened on a Tuesday night, so it was very, very fresh, very fresh. But people felt like something spiritual kind of had happened. Do you guys feel the same way?
Um, I didn't have that same impression. I do remember, hearing like the churches were really full. Not the church I went to, but especially some of the bigger churches had so many thousands of people coming, and obviously people were praying more and trying, thinking about the big questions in life more, I guess. But yeah, it didn't. I was a little nervous about further attacks, and but I guess I thought of it more just like almost like a political thing that happened to my country. I didn't feel necessarily more um, attuned to the spiritual side of it. I don't know, like the things I was really praying about at the time were more about individuals, and that didn't really change with 9/11 happening. I also didn't know anybody who died in the, you know, the two towers or the other planes. So I
That was
guess
a
that
really
informs my experience.
disappointing
Sorry.
response, Dan.
Like
Yeah, you just let the wind out of Ron's sails.
I'm
No,
sorry.
no, not at all. That was actually that's an interesting thing because I have some follow-up questions, but I'll let you answer it also, Jeff.
Come on, Jeff.
I don't remember the spiritual aspects of it. It was certainly an interesting time. I also saw so many American flags on cars' doors. That was interesting. So there was a lot of weird little things going on. So certainly there was a movement. There was a unity in thought that showed itself in the people showing up at your Bible study, the numbers of people at church, and the American flags all over the car windows. And so if you're talking about the people, there definitely was a feeling in the air. I
Well,
remember that.
I guess I heard a lot of people talking about like end times kind of stuff at the time, and that was kind of a fulfillment of prophecy and a
Huh.
number of different things. You don't remember any of that?
The church I was going to at the time, 9/11.
You're in Berkeley,
Huh.
right?
Well, yeah, I was trying to remember which one though. I was part of two churches. Well, either one I think wasn't super into the end times.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I think both of them talked about it, but it wasn't the type of church where if a news event happened, they were talking about how this might be the, revived Roman Empire or the Antichrist or anything like that. I just wasn't in a church like that. Jeff was though, I think. So, right, Jeff?
Yes. CCV, baby. But I declined to state.
This is gonna be a good one. How about you and plead the fifth?
Yeah,
We
how?
could do that on the
How?
show for things you don't want to talk about.
Well, I just want to
Yeah.
know where's Ron going because I'm pretty sure knowing Ron, you're gonna talk. Are you talking about 9/11 conspiracy theories?
Um, would you be worried about talking about that, Jeff?
You're just such an interesting person.
Yeah, well, what was that? Donald Trump? You sent us a Donald Trump quote talking about how it must have been a bomb because of the structure of the Twin Towers.
Yeah, that was a comment that he had made after after the bombing. Yeah.
Poor Trump. He's so hated now.
So I mean, you heard what he said, um, and that's not like just some crazy theory. A lot of people actually believe that.
The president of the United States.
Well, not just the president of the United States. Pretty sure I sent you a link, and it's a nonprofit organization. It consists of a number of different architects and engineers, more specifically, and number of different other people that have joined. It's a pretty big community that people actually say, yeah, the official story, the things that about the buildings crumbling, things like that, couldn't have happened. So that's not like a crazy, like outlandish. They play these things, if I'm not mistaken. You could probably Google this if you want to, but they play these kind of documentaries on like PBS. They're available on Netflix. There's a lot of them, and it's those things are widely held. It's not like some fringe kind of movement. Um, there's quite a few people that have been vocal, and well-known people that have been vocal and said that they don't really think that the story that you were told was the thing.
Well, so do you, and then the
That's called
reason is
argument
that,
by numbers.
yeah, well, but the theory though that I've generally heard, I haven't gotten into looking into those documentaries as
No,
much as
no,
you
no.
have probably,
Whoa,
but
whoa,
the
hold on,
theory is
hold on.
that it was to give us a reason to go to war as a country so then we can um, get oil and increase the profits of the warmongering companies who make war materials. Is that it? Is that the basic idea?
Yeah, I guess yes, in some sense, some of them, yeah, can kind of come to those conclusions. I'm not sure how or why. But there's a lot of other interesting things that they say. No, I know I wasn't trying to make the argument by numbers, Jeff. I was just simply pointing out um, that when it comes to these, we'll call them conspiracy theories, it's not just a crazy like Trump comment that he made, and he's out there all alone saying those kind of things. There's actually quite a few people saying those things, and again, that's not an argument by numbers. That's just simply stating the simple fact that Trump's comment in that clip that I sent you is a representation of a whole lot of people that hold to those things, and it is not a fringe movement by any means.
Do you want to throw a "How dare you" in there?
Yeah, how dare you? Yeah, seriously. How could you do that?
Insinuate
But
that you would make such a low-level
mhm,
argument.
yeah, yeah, because
Argument
the
by a lot of people.
yeah, argument by a lot of people, including by the way, an organization that represents a lot of the family members that lost people. So I'm not so sure. It's like, yes, you can point to things and you can point to people's comments that are truly crazy, but then again, throwing baby out with the bathwater, that's when you start entering that kind of realm, is when you say, yeah, that's silly, but that doesn't mean everything that's said is silly. And that doesn't mean that everything that's said doesn't have some validity to it or isn't interesting. So, you know, so no, not necessarily thinking of exploring the territory of those conspiracy theories, although um, if you're honest, and if you ever do look into those things, you will find again that there's plenty of information. There's plenty of interesting things to consider with the arguments, but it does seem like with most things, um, it's not that people don't have the opportunity to ask questions. People just don't want to ask questions about it, and people don't want to explore it, and people will ridicule kind of those thoughts in an attempt to kind of to move away from the conversation rather than saying, yeah, you know what, actually there are some interesting points and there are some things to consider, but it seems like most people want to kind of get into the well, we're going to make it seem real silly, like a real silly kind of thing and a real fringe kind of thing. And the reality is it's not.
What if
But
most
oh,
people
mm-hmm.
are just moving along down the line, minding their own business, Ron?
Yeah,
And
they want to go to Applebee's and eat a
and
good dinner.
and what's really going on here is there's just not a lot of people getting deep into much of anything.
That's, well, like I said, with a lot of things, it goes that way, right? I mean, as we've experienced over and over again, and even on this show, um, these conversations aren't for everybody. They're
And
not.
and what if it's worse? Based on something I was listening to this week, without getting those details, what if it's even worse if the people, uh, having not thought too much about things, at the same time kind of think that they've thought about things, so they have almost a false narrative about their position on things, in the sense that they really think almost they make up a narrative about how right they are
Mhm.
and how wrong others are. That was deep, by the way. I just said a lot of deep things. What if a lot of people are just kind of cruising along, but when you push comes to shove, they kind of defend things they haven't really even thought that much about.
Yeah, no, that happens. I'm sure some point, everybody does that kind of thing, at least initially. I know I probably have, at moments where I hear something and I start to go, no, and here's the reasons why. And then lo and behold, when I do start to actually consider it, then I go, wow, no, actually, there are some decent points to it. And I'll give you an example. The big one, and you would probably say this too, is like the eschatology stuff. Um, at some point, when presented with the information at first, typically, the initial reaction is kind of like, no, that's crazy. There couldn't be anything to that. But you start searching it out, you start looking into it, and you go, no, actually, there is some interesting things there. Wouldn't you say so? So that all this stuff would kind of fall into that category. Yes? No?
For a lot of people, is what I'm saying. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. For a
And you're
lot of
saying
people.
even for ourselves, I will definitely try to, um, not say I'm above making that same mistake, but I can say I've gotten better at not jumping the gun, so to say. I'm thinking I know why I even believe what I already believe. When
Yeah.
somebody starts to question you on it, I can think of, um, without specific details, but memories in my head of where I'm kind of like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. I found myself saying that more than what maybe used to occur, like you're saying. You immediately start defending something you don't even really know why you've accepted. If that.
Yes.
Yeah. I just saw Jeff do that with the divorce and remarriage issue. What? What?
Oh, I thought you were going to say something negative about
Oh no. No, but I just saw you take a topic that was a scriptural question, and he just really looked into it, and I guess he went where the information led, right? Even if it went against his preconceived ideas.
kind of a big one, actually. I'm already believing a new idea, even though it's a few days old, and I've already talked to at least two strangers about it. And as it comes out of my mouth, I'm thinking, this is a new belief to me, and I'm already kind of like sharing it. But I am convinced of it at this moment. It's a life changing thing. But yes, Dana, that is a good example. I have a new conclusion on something.
Yes. I think I know what you may be talking about.
Polygamy.
No.
No, not polygamy. That was a joke.
Oh, I thought you said William.
William?
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what that means.
No, I said
But
polygamy.
yeah, no, I heard
And
you.
make you laugh. Let's let you guess because you think you know what I'm talking about. I
No,
want to hear you guess.
that's not what I thought you were talking about.
Well, it's not polygamy.
I know. I was anyway. Um so
We're so awesome.
so 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 for you guys 9/11 was not a spiritual kind of event, or didn't seem that way at all, during that time.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
going to say
just
that.
I
I'm
would
not
say
going to say that.
surreal.
The real is definitely the case.
Surreal. Yeah, it was surreal.
So
What spiritually happened with you then, Ron? Like with this event?
I know.
well, no, nothing in particular. Nothing. I mean, I know for me at the time,
Oh my god.
everybody was kind of like, this is the end times kind of stuff. It's just kind of a fulfillment
Huh?
Yeah.
Who were
kind
you
of.
hanging out with, man? Like, I don't know. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
think of any of the. Maybe one, but yeah, it seems like most of the Christian people I hung out. Just what that wasn't the topic at the time. Like
So
the
so
topic.
what was it about? I mean, what was the motivation, behind the whole thing? What caused that? What caused that attack?
I think there's this thing called terrorism.
But they were terrorizing for a specific reason. I mean, they weren't just like waking up one day and going, "Oh, you know what? Let's jump in some planes and crash them into buildings just because we want to make a pretty big spectacle of things."
Oh, but that's a big deal to have such a the towers are a symbol of American prosperity, and to take out so many people in a single day, that's like a big achievement. I
Right,
mean,
right,
you
right.
remember seeing the news footage of
Yeah.
people
So,
cheering.
well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, think about it for a minute. What was though the motivation behind it? Because a lot of people I heard, throughout the years saying, well, they don't like our freedoms, which to me is like that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Um, so
I
I
bet we
mean,
could just find out.
maybe let's answer questions and question answers.
That's a good um,
I like that one.
little, you know,
Yeah.
what is it, byline or
Mm-hmm.
something, motto for our show?
Osama bin
Yes.
Laden's declaration of holy war against the United States in a 1998 fatwa signed by bin Laden and others calling for the killing of Americans are seen by investigators as evidence of his motivation. In bin Laden's November 2002 letter to America, he explicitly stated that Al Qaeda's motives for their attacks include bullet points, U.S. support of Israel, support for the quote attacks against Muslims end quote in Somalia, support of Philippines against Muslims in the Moro conflict, support for Israel quote aggression end quote against Muslims in Lebanon, support of Russia quote atrocities against Muslims end quote in Chechnya, pro-American governments in the Middle East who act as your agents being against Muslim interests, support of Indian, quote, oppression against Muslims, end quote, in Kashmir, the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, and the sanctions against Iraq. It's kind of like a declaration of independence.
Yeah, I remember Ron Paul talking at length about um, he was saying the lack of any concentrated terrorist efforts before, the United States started engaging in certain policies in the Middle East. So his view was that they wouldn't have done these things if we hadn't had such an interventionist policy overseas.
That would be
Yeah.
the 1, 2, 3, 4
Yeah.
different things we supported in Somalia, Moro conflict, Lebanon, and Chechnya. So that would wipe those off the list. And then the pro-American governments, that one's a tougher one. But the Kashmir one, and then the troops in Saudi Arabia, and whatever sanctions we had on Iraq at the time. So that would knock off almost everything on the list except for 2, Dana. The U.S. support of Israel, I'm not sure that exactly what that means. If that's both in word and in action, we would have to find out. If you know what I mean.
I would think it means action.
And then what this one is a strange one. It says pro-American governments in the Middle East who, quote, act as your agents, end quote, being against Muslim interests. That one's a little pro-American governments in the Middle East is a tougher one. But majority of things on the list, it is true. If we didn't have an interventionist kind of approach, I think the argument could be made that he wouldn't have, assuming he's the one who coordinated that attack, done it.
And the conspiracy theories say that it was done by our country so that we could do more interventionist things overseas.
Yeah.
Seems like we do plenty, though, without necessarily an attack being done on our land. We do a whole lot of business.
I think people take it further, though. They go into the actual events of what happened and say, well, what actually took place that day, the things that actually happened. If you go away from kind of the motivation stuff, or you go away from the intervention kind of stuff, and you go into the topics that people attempt to address, that's when they go, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. And then when you start adding things up, or you start piecing the puzzle together, then people start walking away with some different thoughts and different questions. So for instance, and one of the things I read over and over again over the years was that all the steel from the buildings had been gathered up fairly quickly, shipped off to China for recycling, and left, and there wasn't an opportunity to examine it, do any kind of real research on it, put it part of the forensic evidence for the investigation. And there was a number of different responses to that that I had heard over the years. And one of them, I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know if that was just something somebody had, just said, and it kind of spread. What if it was a widely known kind of thing? But it turns out that it actually is a well and widely known fact about the event, that the steel from the building actually was taken away, and it wasn't submitted. Any of it submitted as part of the forensic evidence. And I read an interesting article about the BBC.
Hey, I'm sold now, by the way. I just gotta say, I didn't hear that fact before.
Yeah.
But now that I know that the steel was quickly gathered up and disposed of.
Mm-hmm. Well,
they were definitely trying to hide something.
Well, I think well, I think you laugh at that.
What? No, I was remembering a joke.
You're one of those laughers, Jeff.
There's this joke about a chicken crossing the road, and why? And then you say, to get the other side. I was just remembering that joke, Ron. I was not laughing.
Well, no, but a lot of people do. A lot of people do. Well, that's
a lot of people named Jeff do.
It's true. It's true, but it is a fact, and
Oh,
I did confirm that. Interesting enough,
that they got rid of the steel quickly.
yeah, but
Ooh,
I confirmed it through a couple different
oh, you
ways, but
confirmed this fact.
I did.
Wow, this is getting spicy.
I did.
So they did. You confirmed the fact that they got rid of the steel quickly.
Yes, yes, I did. And I
Mm.
there was an article that I had read because I was looking into one of the things I sent you about the BBC reporting on one of the buildings falling before it actually did. I don't know if you remember that. So when I was reading the article, it was BBC defending kind of the events and their perspective on the thing, and in that article
Hmm.
they had actually talked about um, a number of different things and saying that they couldn't kind of substantiate that there was explosives in the building and fully come to any kind of conclusions when it comes to that conspiracy theory, because one of the reasons why they couldn't come to that conclusion was because there was no steel
Uh-huh.
available for
Uh-huh.
research.
Lines up perfectly.
So,
They should have kept that steel
well,
instead of putting it in trucks,
if
carting it off to a dump.
boats actually,
Boats,
um,
yes.
and so
No, I'm
one
start. I already told you I was sold. Now you're just making it even better.
well, and
Makes
then
sense.
one of
It was
the
if they just had that steel.
mhm. Well,
Does
if
anyone
they
ever? All these conspiracy theorists. Do any of them ever stop to just think it's amazing that those buildings were standing to begin with? The engineering marvel without a plane hitting them. Just do you ever stare at these buildings? They're just what an engineering marvel in and of themselves. And then now take the other engineering marvel that we happen to have, which is called an airplane. Have you ever stared at an airplane, Ron? Seen how big those things are?
yeah, many
Now,
times.
now that's an engineering marvel. I've stared at those things and gone, this is crazy that they get these things flying. Now imagine that plane smacking into the side of a building. I mean, that's pretty amazing that the buildings withstood that, to be honest.
Um, well, yeah, and I'm not an engineer, but there are plenty of engineers out there that say that it makes perfect sense and that it was built to withstand that kind of blast, and that it isn't a marvel at all. And the fact that they tumbled is actually the marvel, because that should not have happened. So and again, that's not kind of any kind of fringe kind of thinking. That's a widely held belief by people, including a number of people that have credentials to speak on those matters. And
Do some of, oh,
when I say
sorry.
credentials, I mean engineers. And
They
I don't know if
did they did survive the impact. I'm just saying that it's all amazing, Ron. And all I'm trying to say is that um, it's clearly the case that these planes ran into the sides of these buildings. That is clear. I'm pretty sure no one denies that, right?
yes, that is clear, very clear, right?
Uh huh.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. I mean, I've heard some say that. I've heard some other strange things, but most people agree that the planes did hit the building. And it
Well,
is my understanding that the buildings are designed. They're supposed to be strong enough to take an impact
yeah, well,
of an airplane.
that's one
And
of
it's my
the
understanding from the videos I saw that they did survive the impact as designed. But
yeah.
as has been stated repeatedly, it was the fire and the jet fuel and all that stuff that caused, uh, combined with the collision itself, I'm sure, a weakening and therefore a falling is the best explanation I've heard.
Yeah, that's I've heard that too. Um, And that's when, people say, okay, well, even if you were to take that, and they go, there's a number of different reasons why they get into the argument, but they say, okay, even if you take the planes hitting the two towers, the building, as they call it, building number 7, and that collapsing, and falling, going into a free fall, which you clearly see on video, and you can't deny that. That's true. They'll continuously say that just doesn't make any sense at all. No sense. There's no reason why that building would have collapsed. And they show aerial views, and they show kind of where it is at a distance, and they show other buildings that were much closer. So it's not just a, you know there are, yes, there are
Here's what I'm trying to say. It's a marvel that the buildings were standing to begin with. I know that I understand the engineers are awesome. It's a marvel that they designed it to withstand the impact of an airplane, according to what I've heard. I think I've heard that too. That's amazing too. But when a plane slaps into the side of the building, and it does survive that, and the plane literally goes through the other side on some shots I see, and the parts are flying through, and the thing's on fire, and then it collapses. I guess what people are saying is that there were bombs in the building, right? And so the idea is that the planes were just like a decoy. The planes were just to make people think that the buildings, so the planes were the whole plane part of it was just to trick people into thinking that the planes knocked down the buildings. And but they really wanted these buildings to fall. It was very important that the buildings fell. So they put bombs in the building, and they got the planes as a decoy. The planes went through. Once the planes were through, they got what they needed. They got the decoy in place, and they hit the bomb button, dropped those buildings, and then that was the plan. Is that my understanding the idea?
Yeah, and yeah, yes, that's I think some of the theories, yes, some of the theories go to that, and the ones that I see that make that argument show the news footage, the news clips, immediately after the attack, and they show the massive amounts of people stating that there was bombs and explosions that were going off. So they use that to kind of make the argument. Which if you watch the clips, yeah, people are saying that. That's not
And then
something.
they're saying that we can't prove this because we don't have the steel. So it's going to be left as a mystery as to whether this is true. If they only had the
Yes.
steel, they would have been able to verify it. But now we're left having to just what? Just we can't prove it. If we had the steel, we could prove it. Now we're just gonna assume it.
Well, I think no, I think the people that are making the argument are submitting that as a piece of the number of different articles of evidence. So you have in these arguments that people are making, that it's not just the steel, it's a number of different things, and when you add that one piece into it, then you go, okay, now I see what they're trying to say. Because if it's true, and if their theories are true, that it was kind of a you know planned thing, inside job, as they like to call it, right? Then it would make sense that you destroy evidence. um the only reason One of the reasons why I brought up the BBC article is that they stated specifically that fact, as as a almost as a proof, that you could not come to any kind of particular conclusions, because the steel did not exist, and there wasn't steel available to do any kind of forensics on. So now the BBC made that argument because they were defending themselves against this conspiracy theory kind of stuff. because of something that they had done, something that they had reported, and more specifically, when they had reported the building falling before it actually did. So anyway, they were responding to that conspiracy theory, and in responding to that conspiracy theory, one of the things that they named was the steel, and how you couldn't come to any conclusions because the steel was not available. So
What's the cherry on top of all this, Ron?
um I I I don't know. I think like for any more, I think for most people, when you hear those kind of things, they spark some interest. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting, right? I mean, don't you think that's that's an interesting thing? Like, we mentioned the buildings are being hit by planes. Well, one of the things that these conspiracy theorists talk about, right, is the Pentagon, and how there's no evidence to show that a plane actually hit the Pentagon. Um,
No evidence. How about the video?
well, yeah, that video though doesn't show a plane hitting the building. It's a very quick little split, and it shows an explosion, and that's it. It doesn't show a plane. And more specifically, though,
There's a priest who witnessed it.
what's that?
There's a priest who witnessed it.
Well, that's I think from a personal experience, I would say there is some super super big problems with the plane argument, and my personal experience is that I actually flew over the Pentagon twice, and I was actually
with or without a plane, out of curiosity.
It's tying it all together. It's a full circle.
Mm-hmm. In a plane, I flew over it twice, and I happened to be in the area, and I happened to see what was going on, and I happened to think to myself, and I thought, that's a actually pretty interesting thing. Here we are, in this place that has many, many tourists, especially during this time of year, because this time of year, school's fully in, and when I was there, they were doing all kinds of field trips, and people from around the world were visiting, and it's a very active place because people go see the monuments, and they go for the history and the museums, and there's all kinds of really really cool stuff in that area. Well, the Pentagon happens to exist in that area, and if you know anything about tourists, and you know anything about people, walking around, one of the things that they have are cameras, and they have video cameras. And um, I find it a little difficult to believe that not one person, not even one, got a picture of a plane flying that low into the Pentagon. That's pretty interesting, to be honest. Coupled with everything else that people present with the argument. But that is a personal experience, by the way. Sorry to say that that for me is a big one, because I was actually there, and I really don't see how that's even possible, to be honest.
That no one happened to see this?
Yes, that's correct. If you've been to Washington, D.C., and you know what's going on there, and you know that area, you know that if a very, very large plane was flying at that angle and flying that low, to have no witnesses, I don't know. That's a bit of a stretch, to be honest.
So, if you tend to believe the conspiracy
Well, no,
theory,
hold on. I'm just stating what my personal experience is. I'm not coming to any conclusions at this point. But what I'm saying is, me personally, having been there and seen what I saw, I would have a very difficult time believing that not one person got footage of it or some kind of picture or saw it.
yes. But if you're sympathetic to the conspiracy theory, or you're very open-minded and see some strong points in it, has that practically led you to engage in a different way with like government systems, or would the natural suspicion of our government lead you to live your life a little differently? Like, do you share less information online, or are you trying to get out of having a social security number, or like, has there
No,
been any
no.
effects?
No, because I don't think there's, there's no, like with all of this stuff, there isn't. Um,
I'm looking at the video, Ron, and I see a plane hitting the Pentagon.
mm,
You didn't
I
slow it down.
There's only one frame of it, Ron, and it's very
yeah,
blurry.
that's a
It's
pretty
very
big
blurry,
problem.
but what's a big problem? That there's only for one frame of it?
Yeah, that's a big problem. And
There's I
um,
can see the blue stripe of the side of the plane. I can see the
uh,
what looks like a fuselage. And in the next frame, it blows up against the building. It is true that it's not that there's not the quality is not that great, but what do you think this big object is that's coming in if it's not a plane? Clearly, there's an
um,
object, Ron, before we go any farther. And it's not a small object, it's a big object. Do you think it was
yeah.
a white rhino? Maybe a really angry white rhino came rushing out of the forest and just boom, right into the wall? Was it
Um,
a big snowball?
well, was it a rocket like some
It's
people
too big to be
suggest?
a rocket, Ron. It's a
Well,
giant,
some
and stop it frame by frame. There's a big, blurry object with the stripe right down the side, just like the plane that was supposed to have. It's very blurry, but it's definitely very big. Not a missile. So what is it?
I don't know, because I don't think you can come to the conclusion that that was a plane based on that picture.
I'm gonna show you the plane. I'm gonna show you the picture because you can see you can see my screen. I can share my screen with you. Would you like to see it?
Oh,
I know Dana thinks she needs to sleep,
I
but
gotta go.
she doesn't understand. This is very important stuff.
I have to wake up really
Oh,
early
hold on.
or
Okay,
stay up really
can you
late.
guys see? Can you see? Can you see? I'm pointing at it. Can you see it, Ron? What is that? What the heck is that right there?
That doesn't look like a plane to me.
Okay, then what is it? A rhinoceros?
I don't know.
Okay. Oh well, what is it?
I don't
Okay,
know. Doesn't.
I know it doesn't look like a plane, but what is it? I'll show you that. If we back this thing up, there's something coming in on the side there that wasn't there before. This guy, let's have a closer look. Here it is. This is so darn slow. What is that? What is that coming in right there? What is that? What's this blue stripe on it? What is that? That wasn't there before, and it comes in. Now this guy's saying it's one of these planes, and he's pointing it out. But
Yeah.
it's certainly very quick. You're right.
I,
But here's the video. You ready? Here's the video you're complaining about. So we got, oh, see? Boom. So what was that thing that came in on the side? What was that, Ron? What is that?
I don't know.
Well, look, right. I just stopped it. Look, what is that? What is that?
I don't know. I don't
It's
know.
not a missile.
I don't know because I'm gonna go with what I hear and what I see with
Look,
pictures, other
it
pictures,
it left a.
and I'm gonna go, where is the plane that hit the
Well,
building?
hold on. I'm just, asking you. All right, whatever.
Where
I don't
is
know
the
if I care.
where?
It's okay. I think it was a conspiracy. You've convinced me. The whole steel thing. I didn't realize that they put the steel in a dumpster and sent it across the ocean before it could be tested. So
Well,
I'm just kidding, Ron. Don't you like when I'm mocking you?
yes, I do. I do. It's fascinating. Anyway, So some interesting things to think about. That's all.
I think it's more than that.
I don't know. I don't know because I
Here,
don't.
let me get on your good side again. When I listen to the conspiracy theory kind of type people talk, and I listen to George Norrie's Coast to Coast online, and I listen to those kind of people, and then I listened to Terry Gross talking to this girl talking about Pure, the book thing, where she's talking about this idea that the purity movement destroyed her life or something like that. And I can't help but feel like all these have fringe elements to them. And if you're following what I just said, I kind of I'm starting to put some of this NPR stuff in the same category as the 9/11 conspiracy theory stuff. Not that they're the same, but um, it has to do with the way ideas are approached. So when the conspiracy people kind of get together and they keep this sort of, they call it the echo chamber, kind of keep adding to their ideas without the best of criticism, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And they let each other kind of just talk on and on. And then on George Norrie's show, he lets people just express ideas freely about any random crazy topic. And then I listened to Terry Gross's interview of that what her name is actually Linda K. Klein, and the lack of criticism and the wholehearted openness to whatever she's saying. If you know what I'm saying right now, I don't know. But
Yeah,
maybe I'm
no.
rambling. But I don't know that the NPR people are that different than the conspiracy theorists. If that makes any sense. Sometimes.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree, especially like on the Russian conclusion or collusion stuff.
Yeah, and again, I'm saying they are different. There's a different nature to the specifics of the details of what they're talking about, but I'm talking not about that. I'm talking about the way that they talk about things that they agree with or are conspiratorially discussing,
Right, right,
versus the way that they're critical of those things that they are not in favor of.
right.
That's kind
So,
of what I'm talking about. It's really interesting.
like for example, the Russian collusion
Yeah,
thing. That would be a perfect example, I think.
yeah. Anyhow, I think Dana left us. I think she gave up on us, Ron, and once again, I'm gonna cast doubt on this being the most amazing show on the face of this earth.
Yeah. Well, I think
What are we gonna do to make it right? You seem to think it's right.
I do. I I do think it's right, actually. I do think it's right. I do think it's I think asking questions and asking these kind of questions, uh, whether we believe in them or not believe in them, just talking about them is just interesting stuff. What would make it more interesting, though, is actually diving into a particular topic and really doing some research and trying to come to some conclusions on these things.
I think my
Um,
favorite thing is getting people who have these perspectives talk with us because we're kind of boring talking to each other because we don't seem to have too strong of positions, or at least strong opposition to each other's positions, and so we kind of just meander around through our own agreement or close to agreement.
well, I think there can be some more interest um, on our parts to dig into something. So, for instance, I mean, if you were just to take the 9/11 conspiracy things, right? For
Which I
you,
didn't treat fairly tonight. I
right,
agree.
right,
I was the dismissive person. I'm sorry.
right, right. Well, what I'm saying is you recognizing that and being that, and which is fine. You being the dismissive person on that particular topic, but we'll use that as an example. But you can take the Russian collusion thing, or you can take any of these topics, and what it really takes is some level of interest to dig into it and say, I'm going to truly explore it. I'm going to truly ask some questions, and ask some important questions to try to come to like some sort of view or conclusion, or have some kind of idea about it. So in my opinion, that's how you make it more interesting. I would guess I would put it in the category of almost like investigative journalism kind of stuff, right?
Sure. So I did a misstep tonight. I'm sorry, Ron. To be
Oh,
fair, although I shouldn't have just been so dismissive, I at the at times in these years since it's happened, I've listened and been curious and looked into many elements of the 9/11 conspiracy theory and found them, in my humble opinion, to be wanting, as they say. Um, and so I have not exhaustively studied it, but I have focused on elements of it that I found intriguing when I heard. And each time I look into them, I just find myself not very convinced of the complete argument, if that makes any sense.
yeah, no, that makes sense.
But I definitely didn't do a good job participating in the investigation tonight. I hope you can forgive me.
Oh, of course.
And we put Dana to sleep.
Good
But
night, Dan.
on the positive side, I think we might have done 2 hours or so. Is that a record?
I think we did more that one night.
Oh yeah, but I cut it out though. See, that's secret stuff. All right, Ron. Well, what the heck are we doing right now? Are we finishing up?
Yeah, we're done. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
we are.
yeah, we're done for the evening,
When
I
do I
think.
get my paycheck?
It's come residuals.
Residuals?
Mm-hmm. Dividends.
I am going to get paid, right?
Dividends. Dividends will come.
Let me see here. My phone is actually not working. Can you hear me?
I could not hear you.
Let me see here. Well, you know what? I'm going to have to. I don't know what I'm going to do, Ron. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, oh my.